Congratulations, you just bought your Graco ES500 battery operated line marking unit. This is a single gun unit. It's a manual unit, so there's no auto controls, and it runs off the DeWalt FlexVolt 18 to 54 volt batteries, which are 6 milliamp. Standard in the unit comes a couple of tips, your tip guard. You also get a small bottle of your throat seal liquid. You also get the manual with that, your Silver Plus gun, and you also get 2 DeWalt batteries with also the fast charger, which charges them in about, I think it's about an hour. 2 batteries with the unit, that's gonna last you a pretty long time. I've had lots of people using these. They get pretty much a whole shift using these units without any issues. By the time you drain one, the other one should be charged. In terms of setup, everything comes standard inside this little bucket here. Then what you wanna do is you wanna take out your tips and your tip guards. You'll notice the tips will be in individual packets, and they'll have the OneSeal in there as well, which needs to be installed into your tip guard before the tip guard gets installed. It's the little black O-ring on the inside there. We've got a great video all about the OneSeals and why they're important and how to install them. So we'll link that below and you can check that out there. But put simply, you want to install your OneSeal, put on your tip. They're reverser clean, so when the arrow is facing backwards towards the gun, it'll shoot a jet for clearing them out. And when it's facing that way, that's your spray fan. So this is a 419 tip, which is pretty standard for marking 150 mil lines or your edge lines. Because it's a soft seal, we can screw it on hand tight, and it doesn't have to be too tight. And then we can flip our tip around. Make sure it's nice and straight, so that way we get a good even fan. And the typical measurement, say 150 mil, is typically from about 300 mil off the ground. So you've got these handy indicators here where you can unscrew them and adjust them upwards, just like that. Or you can lower them down and you've got your 50 mil increments marked in. You can also adjust this gun arm in and out with the same adjustment here. Just like that. The gun arm also is adjustable. So you undo this knob here, and this slides out like that. And you've also got increments on the bar as well, so you can know how far you're doing. Or you can also adjust this one here. So there's quite a lot of adjustment. And with this unit, you can also take off the gun arm and then run it off the other side as well. So you can run the gun arm on either the left or the right side. With the unit, you get 15 meters of hose on there, and that's great for if you're doing your line marking or if you're doing your stenciling. You can simply unscrew the knob here, take the gun out, and then you can do your stenciling work. The gun also comes equipped with the trigger safety lock. Whenever you're not using the unit, you always want to make sure that this is on, or if you're adjusting the tips or if you're moving the gun, always have your trigger safety lock on. Skin injections are a real hazard when it comes to these units, and you always want to err on the side of caution and be as safe as possible. So trigger lock on, changing your tips, and then you can take it off when you go to use it. To reinstall it, it just slots straight back in. And essentially what's happening is when you pull your gun trigger at the top of the unit, it's pulling this gun cable here, which is pulling this lever, which activates your gun and sprays your lines. Coming around the backside here, in terms of controls, it's pretty simple. Your left trigger controls the front wheel, so it's got an auto align lock, so that way it locks the wheel straight, so you can walk it straight. And if you pull the trigger, it unlocks it, so that way you can do curves. Your right hand side is the gun trigger, and that's going to mark your lines. Coming around the back this side here, you've got your brake, which is great for a safety perspective, so the unit's not going to go anywhere. You always want to use your brake when you're on a hill or something like that. I just use it every single time I'm stopped, just to be safe. So we're just going to take the brake off. Then we can wheel the unit. We've got the wheel lock on, so it's going straight. But if we pull our left trigger, it'll unlock that, and then we can do curves. And if we let go of the trigger, it'll lock in back straight again. Controls on the back of the unit. Once you install your battery, you simply want to turn it on. In this case, we filled the bucket full of water because we're just going to prime it out. It's a brand new unit, so it's got the storage fluid in it, and we're just going to prime it through with water. We've got our prime valve here, so up for spray, down for prime, and then we've got our control here. So battery in, there's an LED indicator on here that'll show green when the unit's on, and then we can just have it in prime and increase the pressure. So we've primed the unit, so we've got it the pump fully flushed through with water or paint, whichever fluid we've got in there. We've built a little bit more pressure. We've flicked it into into spray, and now we can see on our pressure gauge that we're reading just under 2000 PSI. Another key thing you want to make sure that you use is your throat seal liquid. Your throat seal liquid goes in the top section of the pump, just in the top section of the G. You only need to use a couple of small drops. And what this does is it prevents the paint that comes back up on the piston rod from going hard and then driving back into the packings, causing unnecessary wear and damage. So now that we've primed the unit, we've put it into spray, we know that it's built and it's holding pressure, so everything should be all good to mark some lines. So we take this brake off. So you can see we've got a nice 150 mil or about 200 mil line there. And because it's an electric direct drive system, you tend to actually get a more even spray fan with it. So yeah, it makes for a good spray finish. And again, I'll illustrate if you wanted to do some curves just with that front wheel. So if I engage my left trigger here, that unlocks the front wheel, and then I can do a curve, pick the line, just like that. Got a nice curved edge. And if you've spotted it, or if you're remarking, it's pretty easy to follow that line. A good example of that would be lining up the center of this if we wanted to remark these. One thing I don't want to do is start and then move, because I'm going to get pooling. So you always want to do a bit of a rolling start. The lines are about 100 mil, whereas the tip's doing about 150, 200 mil, so hence why it's a bit wider, but gives you a good idea. That's really all there is to it. When it comes to the stenciling, as I said, we want to put our trigger lock on so we can't spray ourselves. And you can really unravel this as much as you need, but if you were doing maybe a disabled car park stencil or a motorcycle parking stencil, you could take this off here. Just like that. Now, one thing to note, and I won't go into it too much because we're going to do an in-depth tip video, but if you're doing stencils, you want to use your black tips, not your yellow tips. Your yellow tips are your line marking tips. They're for when the gun's holstered in and you're doing lines. Black tips are for when you're doing stencils and you're overlapping spray fans. One thing I'll illustrate for you real quickly is what it looks like if you do get a blockage and you need to flush the tip. You just simply reverse that and it just sprays a jet instead of a fan. Now you can take the gun off and you can do that into a waste pail, so that way you don't make a mess. Or if you've got a bit of cardboard, you can just run over the top of that and do it. That's the best way to do it. Being that it's an electric unit and it's got the DeWalt batteries, the electric motor, the direct drive, there's not too much in the way of troubleshooting when it comes to that end of it. However, there are a couple of things that remain standard just because of that piston pump. So things like you've gone away from the unit, you've come back to it, you've started spraying again, but it's losing pressure, and then you try to reprime, but nothing's happening. That usually happens because the paint gets a bit of paint skin on the ball in the lower housing, And what happens then is it can't actually move freely, and so it's not producing any suction. So what you need to do is just with a rubber mallet, while you're running the unit in prime, a couple of light taps on this lower housing, that'll free up the paint skin, it'll flow through the pump, and you're not gonna have any problems. It'll start re-priming, then you can flick it back into spray, it'll build pressure again, and you're good to go. Yeah, in terms of troubleshooting, that's really all I can say. There's not too much else in the way that goes. Occasionally the gun cables wear over the time, but it's just replacing those as per normal, and there's not too much else. Now, when it comes to cleaning up and packing down the unit, what we want to do is we want to turn down our pressure dial. And we can do this again on cardboard, or we can have the gun off in a waste pail to keep it clean. We just want to evacuate the pressure in the unit, so that way we can turn this drain valve from spray back into prime. You can, in an emergency, just flick the prime valve from spray to prime. However, what it will do is it'll send a shock down that prime valve spring, and it will wear faster than is normal. So it's something you don't really want to be doing very often. Always opt to release pressure through the gun, because it's the safest way, and it's also the best way in terms of longevity for your equipment. But now we've drained all the pressure. We can see on the pressure dial there's no pressure in the unit. We flicked it into prime, and now we can take out our paint. And what we're going to do is we're going to cycle, I usually say roughly 2 drums of water through it. So you want to have a waste pail, you want to have a fresh drum of water, you want to put your suction tube and your drain tube into your fresh drum, prime that through until it's primed into the line. You want to have your gun in your paint bucket, and slowly, while holding the trigger, build up that pressure, so that way you can get out all the paint that's trapped in this line, because there's still quite a lot of paint kept in your hose. You don't want to waste it. So holding the trigger, slowly build the pressure, and then you can flick it into spray, and you'll see that slowly start to flow through. Once it's getting to the water, you'll notice, because it'll start spluttering and spitting, you can then turn off the pressure, release the trigger, flick it back down to prime. And then what I like to do is that's where I'll basically, in my waste pail, start the flushing process through the gun. So again, repeat the same steps, but instead of into the paint, reclaiming the paint that's in the line, into a waste pail, just flushing through with water. And you want to keep flushing that through until it's relatively clear. It'll look milky if you're doing white. And that's when you want to swap to another fresh drum of water and flush that basically fully through until it's basically clear. And then when you're not using the unit, pump armor. You want to prime this through. I hear a lot of people talk about different options in terms of what you can use. Some people will just prime water into the lines. Some people will do nothing. Some people will use coolant. I can tell you that all those options are pretty bad options. In terms of what I've seen in the field for coolant, that has worked for some people and it hasn't worked for others people. Whereas I know the pump armor works every time. So I've never had someone use this and have a problem. If you're not putting any fluid in it, it's going to dry out inside the pump when the unit's not in use. And when you go to use it again, the plastic and leather packings are going to crack. If you just prime water into it, everything's going to rust. This is lubricating and it's anti-corrosive, and you can use it like car wash, so it's pretty great. With maybe half a drum of paint, a couple of splashes of pump armor into it, you just want to prime that through the line, and then that's it. So just to reiterate, I've fully flushed my unit, I've reclaimed the paint that was in the line, I've then got another fresh drum of water, and I've flushed that unit. I've taken out my manifold filter and I've given that a rinse in the water, because it doesn't matter how well you flush it, you'll always get bits of debris and paint build up in here because it's a filter. It does its job really well and it'll capture all that. So if you're not taking these out like this and giving them a clean individually, these are going to build up, you're going to have issues spraying, you're going to get lots of debris in the line once these start blocking up. I do the same thing for my tips as well. So I take my tips and guard off, I give them a bit of a rinse. I also spray them through with water. So once I'm on my second bucket and I'm flushing, I'll build up some pressure and I'll just spray through some water as well. So it's fully flushed through, tips are clean, filters are clean, bit of pump armor in there. in the prime position, turn on the pump, run some prime through it, then you can turn it back off and flick it into the spray position for these units. The spray position is where the spring's not compressed on the prime valve, so it's going to give you the longest life there as well. Turn off the unit, and we're good to go.